The following recording is a part of Skift's Travels Path Forward series of online summits. To discover and register for future events, visit forum.skift.com. Welcome from Skift. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for Travels Path Forward, Destinations and Marketing. This online summit is a part of our series of virtual discussions that Skift is hosting as a rapid response of tactical ideas, analysis, and resilience to the industry as it responds to the coronavirus challenge. We're hosting these webinars weekly and highlighting discussions across the industry as it responds. We'd like to thank all of our incredible speakers for sharing their time and perspectives today, as well as to our partner CrowdRiff for sponsoring today's online summit. We'll be recording this event and interviews for archival on our website, should you miss any of these discussions. There will be no Q&A via Zoom. However, a number of attendees have sent some questions in via email, and then we also are monitoring the hashtag Skift Summit on Twitter for your questions. To kick things off, please join me in welcoming Skift's CEO and founder, Rafat Ali.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our third Travels Path Forward. It feels like the 500 just because we're doing so many Zoom calls these days. I was Googling yesterday, how many weeks are left in the year? It said 37 weeks left in the year. That felt like 37 years are still left before the end of the year. So certainly in those days and weeks that are there ahead of us and months ahead of us, what do? We're dreaming of destinations. We don't dream of airports. We don't dream of airlines. We may dream of hotels or Airbnbs, but we dream it obviously in conjunction with where we're going. In fact, my son, who's 5 years old, and this is a prop I'm using for this one. He thinks this is a Skift plane. This is actually a Spirit plane that he asked me, Abu, when are we going to Puerto Rico? So, which is what he's dreaming of. So I guess we should ask that question to Brad, who's going to come and speak. So long story short, destinations, there's no recovery in travel unless there's recovery in destinations going ahead. So over the next 90 minutes or so, we're going to talk about destinations and the path ahead. I'm very excited about this because this happens to be our sweet spots of what we cover at Skift. Obviously, over the last 2.5 months, Skift has been covering what's been happening in the travel industry. We started pretty early, maybe mid-June, and we've been covering nonstop since then. We have a live blog. That's the one that you see on the screen. It's a live blog. If you go to the Skift homepage, you should be able to get to the blog, which has been covering everything that's happening in the travel industry. Obviously, our stories on Skift, whether you're accessing through our daily newsletter or through social media. Our research team is doing a lot of great research on the travel industry as well. So, Brian, if you want to move ahead the slide. We have a bunch of these summits coming up, one a week. Next week is focused on travel PR. We have loyalty, short-term rentals, online travel, hotels, travel advisors, luxury travel. So one a week, similar format, about 90 minutes or so, focused very much on what's happening now and what's the path ahead. So speakers, 3 to 5 speakers focused on different parts of the travel industry. Skift has been doing this work. Obviously, we're as hurt as anybody else in the travel industry. So one of the things we've done is instead of launching a subscription service that we initially planned to do, we're focused on essentially contributions, very much like Guardian does. And if you like our work, we would ask you to consider supporting our work. You can go to my.skift.com/support and, do your bit, whatever you want to do. So thank you again. And with that, I'll hand over back to Brian.
Thank you, Rafat. So next up, for our first discussion, we have destinations working to find a new normal. This conversation will feature the CMO of Visit Florida, Stacy Melman, CEO of Discover Puerto Rico, Brad Dean, and will be moderated by Skift Global Tourism reporter, Rosie Spinks.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome to Brad and Stacy. Thanks so much for joining us today. And welcome to our audience. I want to start big picture here. So can you both tell me your biggest concern right now about the state of your destination or your industry, as well as one thing that's kind of a hope or a silver lining.
Brad, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Well, good morning, Skift Nation. Buenos dias from Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, we jumped out early in terms of the sheltering at home and curfew restrictions. We've been very proactive at the airport in terms of testing temperatures and testing for COVID. So recognizing that Puerto Rico has been through a lot of challenging crises in recent years, and having lived through the Zika crisis, we knew we had to get ahead of the game. I think the biggest concern is, as we come out of this, Rosie, we're dealing with two major crises here. The focus right now is on public health, and of course it should be, but we're also facing one of the most monumental economic disasters in our lifetime. For us in Puerto Rico, this is having the impact of 3 Hurricane Marias. So I think the big concern is, what does the economic forecast look like coming out of this? Because that's going to directly impact the recovery. And then also adapting and helping all of our business partners respond to the new and changing needs that this is going to bring. We're going to see a massive sea change of disruption, and some of that'll be good, some of that'll be bad. But we know this: every economic crisis brings unwanted problems, unexpected challenges, but also unprecedented opportunities. But we've got to be able to get ahead of the curve and use those to move our industry forward.
Yeah, I would completely agree with Brad in saying that for us, like, one of the biggest concerns that we have is what is the economic destruction going to really look like? I mean, I think everybody's really been focusing on the health concerns and the safety concerns of residents, and rightfully so, but we have no idea the scale of the destruction that lies ahead. And for Florida, with the tourism being the top economic driver, we feel like we really carried the brunt of the load in terms of the economic fallout. And this is just the beginning. We've since early March or mid-March, there's been $1.6 billion of lost revenue for hotels alone. How much, how long is that going to last? How much can our local destinations and our local businesses sustain that? What is the evolution of those local communities going to look like after people start to the restrictions ease and people start to get back to a new normal? All of the unknowns are, I think, for us, are the most difficult piece of it. And I think probably for all of you is, you're trying to build recovery plans, you're trying to build scenario plans on how to address these problems, but there's so many rocks that have been unturned. So it's very difficult to build an appropriate and helpful strategy to deal with your local stakeholders, to support your local economies without necessarily understanding or even knowing what the next possible, potential challenge is going to be.
Right. And is there anything giving you signs of a silver lining or hope?
I think for us, we're looking at forward bookings, future bookings, and I think that there isn't as much of a gap in what we see, kind of towards the fall. People are still looking at travel, looking at kind of future experiences. So I think that the fact that the desirability is still there, I think, is definitely a silver lining. It's just a matter for us about how do we ensure that both the visitors and the residents feel a sense of safety, that Florida or any destination is a destination that they can feel comfortable traveling in.
Right.
I think we're encouraged in Puerto Rico to see that the GDS bookings in the second half of the year are beginning to trend up. We've actually booked 8 pieces of group business for 2021 going forward. And perhaps the biggest silver lining in this massive dismal cloud is the research that continues to come out that tells us that travelers do want to travel. It's the willingness and the ability that we've got to get beyond.
Right. And whether they can afford it in the future.
Mm-hmm. So Stacey, when we spoke preparing for this webinar, you said that this crisis had kind of showed the fragility of the destination marketing industry in a really striking way. And I thought it was really memorable to me, the way that you put that. And we know there's been extensive layoffs and furloughs across tourism marketing. So I'd like both of you to address what you think DMOs need to or should do differently moving forward? Not maybe it's to ensure financial survival and resilience, but also sort of to continue their relevance, once we are on the other side of this.
I'll start. Yeah, I think that this pandemic has really exposed. There's a few things that we've learned from that. It's exposed like the unbelievable fragility of our industry, the interdependence of our society. And I think this is a quote from Rafat that he said that travel is the most consequential industry in the world. So I think that we need to take those three things and figure out, like, how do we reinvent ourselves as destinations? Right now, destinations are going to be focusing on developing their recovery campaigns, and they should be doing that. But they should also be planning their evolution. I think that the recovery campaign is essentially like the business as usual. It's what their communities expect from them. But beyond that recovery effort is an opportunity to build a much more sustainable company, which includes, perhaps rethinking their funding model or the constituents that they serve. The recovery is going to take time. The reinvention period is going to take more time. But what DMOs can start to do as they're going through this process is start to shift their perspective about, who they are, thinking more broadly about what community value they bring beyond just tourism promotion. And I think that that's going to be hard for many people to do, and I absolutely get it. But the DMOs that are going to be the most successful in their future reinvention are going to be the ones that figure out just how to unify their local stakeholders, both within their industry and outside of their industry, and explore new ways to bring value. Which of course, like, it's hard to put a point on it because it's going to have to be locally specific. Every destination is going to have a specific and different need for what those destination marketing organizations can do for them.
Right. Brad, do you want to?
Yeah, Rosie, you started with a key point. I think this is the one that we've all got to center around, and that is relevance. And relevance is adding value that others can't or won't add. So in Discover Puerto Rico, we began our recovery planning the day the governor announced the first restrictions. And our premise was simple, that the heroes on the front lines today are the doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers. But you and I are part of the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines that are going to fight this second war. So every destination marketer and the partners have to own the recovery. And we began to look at what's it going to take. A couple of things that we found. First and foremost, I think anybody that's ever sailed a sailboat knows this rule. You can't determine the direction the wind blows, but you can adjust your sails and adapt accordingly. And great marketers are doing that. So I think right now our mission hasn't changed. We apply it differently. We may activate upon it differently, but it's still important to keep your destination top of mind. Just have to do it in a different way. So in our case, we've certainly adjusted to that with different cadence, some different tactics. We've been actively promoting virtual vacations. We know you can't come to Puerto Rico, so we're bringing Puerto Rico to you. And from your living room, you can enjoy the rainforest. You can enjoy creations made by Puerto Rican chefs. And we've seen these not only attract a lot of followership and engagement online. Our partners at the Caption Agency have been able to pitch this and deliver over $6 million for media value by promoting that. I think another thing that's critically important is right now, lean into those relationships that are so important. If they were important to you before, they're going to be even more important coming out of this. So travel advisors who are at home can't necessarily be booking vacations. We offered a modest cash incentive for them to enlist in our Travel Agent Academy program. And I think we enrolled more travel advisors in the month of March than we had for the first 6 months of last year. And I think that's part of the reason we're seeing those bookings in the second half increase. We also know meeting planners are stuck at home. So we said, look, if you're going to be stuck at home, you at least deserve a good cup of coffee. We sent them some Puerto Rican coffee, which not only helped our coffee farmers, but it gives them a chance to think about Puerto Rico. And all of this is working. I think we were one of only 3 destinations in the month of March that saw the Google searches for their destinations increase year over year. Well, all of this is an effort to adjust the cadence, the tone, the tactics, but still keep our destination top of mind so that when people can travel, they'll be thinking of Puerto Rico.
Right. Stacey, you mentioned funding models, and that was something I wanted to ask you both about. So we know from Destinations International that 95% of their members in North America get their funding from such accommodation taxes, tourism taxes, hotel taxes. We also know that revenue is essentially close to non-existent right now. So is that model sustainable going forward? What work is being done to reimagine that? Are you confident about that? Thoughts?
Look, it's a really tough question. I think that for a portion of the funding, I think looking to accommodation taxes, I think is appropriate. But as we're experiencing, it can be very unreliable and devastating to destinations. So I have to ask, like, why should that continue to be the best option that's available? Frankly speaking, the yearly budget battles that DMOs have to fight are not setting them up for success. So I think that we need to be thinking about funding models that create focus on achieving a collective goal for destinations, and that shouldn't be this like year-to-year approach. I know that I'm being very optimistic here, and I think that it's probably like very difficult because cities and states have like a specific set kind of funding that they're getting, but it would be wonderful if places could commit to funding to a certain amount of funding to achieve set goals over a period of time, and if they achieve those goals, then new goals are set and funds are appropriated to achieve those goals. I think that definitely a diversified funding model is something that destinations should be looking at. How that is specifically is a very hard question to answer. So I'm sorry that I'm not helpful on that, but I definitely think that we're in a situation that we've been exposed to the challenge that we have, and without the funding, we're not going to be able to do the destination promotion that we need to. So this is really exposed kind of a challenge with what we're dealing with.
Right, and you would sort of know that better than most at this point. Most of our viewers probably know Visit Florida has been in a sort of protracted funding battle for what feels like years at this point.
Yes.
Brad, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Absolutely. We are facing massive disruption at all levels. And I think this is one that needed disruption, arguably for decades. The old accommodations tax model worked well in the 80s and 90s. It's far from ideal today. I would suggest this. If you're in it's an adequate funding source if you're in a destination where no politician would ever consider touching your funding for political gain. They're just totally enamored with you and your industry. If you're in a situation where booking hotel rooms is the beginning and ending of your measurements, and if you're in a situation where you're not concerned about economic disruption or downturns, then maybe it works. But for the rest of us who are not promoting destination utopia, we have got to evolve. And I think the one key word on this one is diversifying. The thought that it would go away certainly is not practical today, but we as an industry have to evolve beyond just relying on past success to fund our future endeavors. And there's examples of success out there. Myrtle Beach evolved from accommodation taxes to a kind of self-imposed assessment, and then eventually a destination-wide sales tax that the residents themselves supported because they benefited. We've seen many communities, particularly in California, that have used tourism improvement districts. We've also seen others. Salt Lake City is a good example that evolved from a membership model to a partnership model. I think all of this comes down to three things. Number one, you've got to be willing to make some bold changes, and now is definitely the time to tee up bold changes. Number two is you've got to be willing to demonstrate value. You have to laser-like focus on demonstrating value, and today, that's not only to your hoteliers, that's to become a shared value for your whole community. And then third, and certainly most importantly, is you got to think long-term. None of these changes, as Stacey mentioned, will happen overnight, and we can't certainly switch one for the other completely. What we can do is, as an industry, recognize that if we can deliver value and we stay relevant and our communities recognize that, then we can begin to diversify. And if we did that, many of us would find ourselves in a much better financial position come the next crisis.
Right. Well, thank you both for your candor on that question. I've definitely detected a sort of shift in my interviews and conversations over the past few months with tourism marketers, that people do seem to be talking from a place of more honesty around these kinds of funding issues that I think did exist before, but obviously are so much more extreme now. So I want to slightly switch gears to something a little more positive. Brad, we spoke a few weeks ago for a story I wrote kind of at the beginning of this wave of campaigns coming from DMOs and destinations that are increasingly creative and thinking outside the box and doing something that you would never think a tourism marketer would do, which is telling people to stay home. So I wondered if either of you had an example from a destination that's not your own of some really creative campaigns or marketing that you've seen in the past month or so that you wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I've been encouraged. There has been some really creative, refreshing thinking out there in the industry. There's a lot of CMOs and their teams that have been hunkered down, trying to do what we've been trying to do at Discover Puerto Rico, which is provide inspiration to travel. It may not be okay to travel today, but it's still okay to dream about traveling. And that's what we do as travel marketers, is we ignite those dreams. So I love what Marriott has done with their We Will Travel Again campaign. I think the WTO provided some really compelling messaging and content with their Travel Tomorrow campaign. And I think there's been some cute examples. The Hilton Doubletree sharing their beloved cookie recipe, I think, was cute and compelling. And we found, in our efforts with our All in Good Time campaign, that people are receptive to this. It's got to be the right tone. It's got to be done in a classy way. But we're seeing increased engagement, increased followership, and we think it's working well. And our hope is that while people aren't planning for traveling, they're still dreaming of traveling. And I think some of these campaigns are reminding people that it's okay to think about that. And hopefully we're laying the groundwork for an accelerated recovery, which may be the best that any of us could hope for right now.
Stacey?
I would agree with Brad. I think that the creative has been in abundance, and I love it. Like, I'm obsessed with it, because as a marketer, it's really fun to dig in to see like how everybody is responding specifically to like the same situation. I applaud all of the destination brands that have acted quickly to create virtual experiences that people can do from their own home. I think for destinations, Hawaii shared a great video about the Aloha Spirit. Illinois did an All In for Illinois campaign that was a really nice way to speak to locals about why they should stay home. But honestly, I don't know if you guys have seen this, the National Cowboy Museum. Are you familiar with this effort? The National Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma City gave their Twitter and their social media responsibilities when they closed their doors in March to their security guard, their head of security, Tim. And I really think that this is honest. If it's a marketing stunt, it is a genius marketing stunt, but I don't think that it is. Tim is new to Twitter, and he's learning like how to do hashtags. And he goes around the museum and snaps photos of different artifacts and kind of shares little jokes about them or talks about why they're significant. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've grown their Twitter following from under 10,000 to over 300,000 because the security guy, Tim, is so endearing and funny and likable. I think that they did a fantastic job just kind of exposing what their museum has to offer in a time when people can't visit.
Wow, I have a feeling I'm going to be assigned to write a story about the Cowboy Museum now.
It's great.
So I want to thank you both so much for joining us today and for your transparency and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So now we're going to actually launch a brief poll. And as a reminder, today's discussion is decidedly domestic, of course. So we will be considering international discussions into the future for those of you that are asking. So I've launched a poll. What kinds of destinations in the US do you see recovering fastest? Beach resort destinations, small town or rural areas, or large cities and urban centers? As you are voting, I'm going to introduce our next discussion. So next up, we have a discussion on evolving the destination playbook, strategies to accelerate tourism's recovery. This conversation will feature partner 2031, Greg Klassen, and SkiftX Director of Creative Strategy, Matthew Heidkamp, and moderating will be SkiftX Research Editor, Jeremy Cressman.
Thank you so much, Brian. So in this session, we're going to be talking about strategies that destinations can use to speed recovery. But what does good destination recovery strategy, what does that look like? And how should you actually engage the stakeholders that you have as a tourism organization in your destination? And also, what sort of messaging, what should that look like when it's time to actually communicate to partners and stakeholders? So in this conversation, to make sense of those questions and the role that destinations are going to play in tourism in the future, we have two speakers with us. One of them is Greg Klassen. He's a partner at 2031 Consulting. They're a destination marketing consultancy. I'm also joined today by my Skift colleague, Matt Heidkamp. He's the Director of Creative Strategy for SkiftX. Matt has actually worked with dozens of destination-focused clients at Skift, ranging from Brand USA to Business Events Canada to Las Vegas CBA, among others. So Greg and Matt, welcome both of you to this discussion.
Good morning.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Greg, I want to start by asking you, you've had a lot of experience working with destinations during crisis moments. As I understand it, you were working in destination marketing during 9/11, during the SARS outbreak. And I think a lot of destinations are struggling right now with similar uncertainty about how they make a plan. What's the first thing they should prioritize as far as like recovery, just getting out ahead of what's going on right now? Do you have any advice on the first steps they should take? Are there scenarios or questions they could be thinking about to try and manage what they need to do next?
Yeah, I think you used two operative words there. The first one was struggling, and it's very clear. Destinations are struggling. The funding model for destinations suggests that many of those who work at DMOs have been furloughed. There are not a lot of people left to help with the build of recovery, at least not right now. But the other side of that equation is the SMEs, the small, medium-sized businesses engaged in tourism, who are also struggling as well. So I think recovery needs to look at not just the demand side of this equation, but also the supply side, and understanding the struggles that SMEs are going through, understanding what they need now in order to stay in business, because we need those small businesses. We need those boutique hotels. We need those experience providers to help us with our recovery. We need a reason for people to travel to our destinations. And if they're not there, then we have not much left to market. So, again, the focus is really on supporting and helping them sustain themselves until we get to that point where the crisis has been at least somewhat contained, that we can start to welcome visitors back again, that we can keep them afloat and start doing the jobs that we do as destination marketers, and that is to help create demand for our destinations going forward.
So as part of this first question, I have to follow up on this, Greg. Are there particular ways of planning out scenarios that may come and how you can prepare for that, or channels in the destination ecosystem that you need to be considering here? For example, if I was a state tourism board, what should I be doing right now to deal with
that's a really great question. Again, I'll pick a hypothetical destination like an Arizona, for instance, and Arizona would, I suspect, do some scenario planning right now. And the biggest question, I think, on the minds of every destination is, when will this be deemed over? And I don't think over is going to be very concrete. I think it will be a gradual return to some semblance of normal that will eventually turn into welcoming of guests. So that scenario planning should be looking at saying, when is my peak season? For Arizona, it might be the fall, so they've got a little bit of time to plan for that. In other countries, like where I am here in Canada, peak season is starting up this summer. We have very little time. So the idea is a scenario planning to say, what of my customer base is going to return? Do I rely on international travelers, or do I rely on local and domestic travelers? What are the channels that might return? Where I'm accustomed to pulling in from this tour operator and this tour operator, but will they be viable? They themselves will be going through scenario planning to determine which of those destinations they're going to return to the fastest in order to grow their revenues. and frankly, which airlines are going to return. That 7 to 8 times a day or 8 times a week flights may not be returning back to my destination. So we have to look at all of those equations, and that's why scenario planning we think is really important in order to determine what path might this take and how will that have impact. Where are my vulnerabilities as a destination, and where do I need to shift to a new market, a new channel, or a new airline to help support my recovery?
Yeah. So Greg, one of the constituencies you mentioned in your last answer was consumers. And as consumers begin to travel again, it was interesting to hear Brad and Stacy talk about this in the last panel. Just logistically speaking, a lot of people can't leave their country right now or come in from outside the country. How do you think about the type of consumers that, if I'm a destination leader, what are the segments that are going to return first, or how do you manage that decision-making process in terms of who you're reaching out to now?
Yeah, and by the way, I thought that Brad and Stacy were just brilliant on their panel. I learned a lot from them, and I feel like their destinations are really in good hands. I'm hoping that others are as well. The question about who's going to return first, again, lots of people are talking about that domestic traveler. And again, if I go back to my example of Arizona, you're sitting on a next door state of 30 plus million people. The domestic traveler, ease of ability to drive to your destination would be really helpful. But I look at maybe what Brad was talking about with Puerto Rico, a little less hard to rely on that domestic traveler, really looking at those travelers that are accustomed to coming by airline or flights. So it'll be a different story for them. So it's specific to, I guess, the destination that you have. But I'm also thinking that there are intrepid travelers out there. Intrepid travelers are people who are frequent, international travelers. This is an irritant to them. As long as they have their jobs and their money, they will travel again first. Also looking at things like VFR travelers. Again, perhaps not staying in hotels, but spending money in tourism, attractions, and accommodations will be important.
Greg, what's this acronym you just used? DFR? What is
VFR, visiting friends and relatives.
Of course. Okay. Got it.
Right. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
But again, a group of travelers, people will want to visit their friends and relatives and reconnect again. And another one that may be overlooked more is what I call communities of interest. The buddies that go on the golf trip every year, they're going to want to reconnect with their friends and do that normal activity again. The rock climbers who love to get together and do that trip or that experience, or the girls' getaway weekends. I think that those kinds of communities will be among the first to return again, provided that they have the money in their bank accounts to support their travel.
Now, Greg, we talked about consumers, some of the audiences that may come back first. Let's flip this dynamic and talk about the other side of the equation. Some of the relationship partners in a destination, whether that's your suppliers, the people that are providing products, maybe the local businesses, which we know, are really struggling right now. What are some factors, whether that's distribution or protocols you need to communicate to them, that you think destinations need to be considering right now?
These are the ones that I'm worried about the most. I mean, as a recovering destination marketer for 15 years, I know we know how to do that. I know we do a good job of creating demand for our destinations, and I think we've got that covered. I worry about the supply side. Again, I worry about our small and medium-sized businesses that can stay afloat to help us with our recovery. I worry a little bit about our channel partners who, the people with the tour operators out there that are accustomed to bringing, our volumes of travelers to our destinations themselves. Are they going to be viable going forward? And are they going to choose our destination? Is that going to be among the first choice, or how can we help them do that? We've been struggling with the word DMO for a long time, and that middle word, management, I think is acutely important right now. Again, we've got marketing down, but managing our destinations, helping manage our channel partners, helping manage our SMEs and our small businesses out there that are engaged in providing the tourism experience. I think that's where destinations can really come in handy right now.
Yeah, I mean, we talked yesterday about, online travel agencies and their cancellation policies and how that sort of scenario can play into your decision making. If the cancellation policies are too strict, how does it impact who you're able to bring in and attract or is willing to come to the destination after that? So I think, certainly something to consider, right?
There is a wholesale change in and how experienced providers will have to, will there be lineups? Will the restaurants be half as full? Will the attractions have to have gate and only allow a certain number of people in? Are we going to be at 50% capacity then from what we've had before? And what's that going to do to the attraction? What's that going to do to the price? We have some clues out there. We're looking at China right now that is recovering right now in their own tourism industry to get a sense of what they're doing in order to mitigate the downsides of what's going to happen. We don't know how long any of this is going to happen, but we can help our businesses and our channel partners sort of navigate what that future might look like.
So I want to turn things over to Matt for a second because we haven't had a chance to talk to you yet. Greg has talked quite a bit about some of the best practices or things to be considering during the recovery process. But I also want to talk about the marketing piece of this equation, right? Because after the destination nuts and bolts have been figured out, you've got to socialize this to your partners, to stakeholders. Matt, I'm wondering if you could talk about some ways that we've worked with destinations at Skift to try and figure out these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. So, I think my perspective on this is that the research part and the marketing part should be clearly linked, especially with DMOs who are really poised with having to talk to so many different stakeholders, whether that's the community, whether that's the local businesses, their trade and channel partners. For us at the SkiftX Creative Studio, which is the in-house agency here at Skift, I think we noticed early on, probably when we started in 2014, that partners kept coming to us with lengthy, data-heavy research reports that they'd be commissioning from big consulting firms. And it would be great information, but just very dense. So really a key for us has been how do you contextualize these findings? So when you're talking about scenario planning or re-envisioning what the future of the destination might be, how can you take these really key learnings and turn it into content that's digestible, that's actionable, that's engaging, and really has some more storytelling to it? Because again, when you're dealing with so many different stakeholders, you need to realign what that message is in order to inspire and inform and create action with that audience. So I think contextualizing data in that way through clearer analysis, access to wider travel trends, really connecting those dots and utilizing storytelling is key to putting any of these into action. I think about some past projects we've worked on before, say with Destination Canada, who I think has just done a really great job at connecting their tourism, meetings, and economic development strategies so they're all working as one. We worked with them to really dive in and tell that story in a way that would drive influence and engagement with their regional tourism partners and with the government itself there. So we went in on the ground, interviewed different regional leaders, created case studies, learnings, and really utilized storytelling there to showcase why their strategy is working. And I think as a result of that, they've been able to have countrywide adoption of this strategy and really putting that into action now. Another example I think of is working with the Las Vegas Tourism Board a couple of years ago. For them, it was really a matter of how can we tell a new story for the city of Las Vegas, which, like many cities, has a certain sort of stigma, has that you instantly know what's in your mind when you think about Las Vegas. So how can you arm your partners, especially in the hospitality space for a DMO, with a new story to tell? So we really went in and started to uncover the different innovations, the big research firms, the academic things that are happening within Las Vegas to really give them a new story to tell and a new value proposition to those hospitality partners. So I think when you're talking about putting these scenarios and the new vision plans into action, it's really a matter of being able to contextualize that information, but then also acting as a knowledge partner to the different stakeholders, whether that's hospitality, community, local businesses, what have you, so everyone's working in one cohesive motion.
I really like that approach, Matt, this idea of putting things into context with stories or knowledge or data, and then socializing it to the people that need to be bought into that process in order for it to work properly. So thanks for the explanation in those case studies. Greg, Matt, obviously we've talked a lot about recovery, these immediate challenges that a lot of destinations face right now. But I also don't want to forget about the future, because I mean, at some point when tourism starts to return, there will be opportunity for destinations to rethink their role in the tourism economy. How do you, avoid losing sight of that longer term focus? And what are some opportunities that destinations have to pivot in the future as a result of what's happened now, and kind of rethink their role for tourism economies?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with that. I mean, destinations have been on a 10-year run. I mean, 2019 was our best year ever. 2018 was the best year ever prior to that. We've been in sort of an autopilot in terms of tourism, welcoming visitors, and we've encountered, as a result, a number of challenges. It wasn't very long ago we lamented over tourism, and we wish we had that problem back again, perhaps. But we have one single unique opportunity to press the reset button for our destinations. We have an opportunity to determine and envision the destination that we've always wanted and the destination that we have right now, and do a gap analysis between what we have today, who are the customers we have today, who are the channel partners, who are the air partners, what are our experience providers offering, and the one that we really want, because we can start to rebuild our destinations in the vision that we have. We as destination managers, we as governments, we as city mayors, and the tourism industry. I think now is a really, perhaps not now, but maybe in a few months from now, when recovery starts to happen, we can have those conversations with our own respective industries to try to determine what our future really looks like, and then we can start to rebuild against that vision itself.
Yeah, I would tack onto that as well. I mean, I think the word management is key, adding that extra O between the DMO. And I think Stacy from Visit Florida hit on that really nicely before, in terms of this crisis being an opportunity to really elevate the value of what the DMO can mean. I think acting as a steward that really has the best interests of the entire destination, the locals, the residents, the people who live there, and being able to, act as holistically minded as possible in that regard, will be a really great way to have this emergence and have be in a stronger position at the end of the day, after this crisis subsides.
Thanks, Matt. Well, so I want to wrap things up by sharing some news that I think we have. I understand that Skift and 2031 are actually working on a new partnership, collaboration, if you will. Matt, could you maybe tell us quickly about how the two organizations will plan to be working closely together in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeremy. And we're really excited to be partnering. I think both our brands have a real commitment into understanding the tourism challenges and making sure that we can really set us up for a more sustainable future. So we'll be releasing some information over the next couple of days, likely sending out an email to the people who are joining here today, and really make sure that we're able to provide actionable intelligence and action plans to destinations who need them right now, so they can get over the current crisis and also set themselves up in the future for stewardship, reinvention, and everything that they need to really be successful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Greg, it's been a pleasure talking with you both. Appreciate all your insights today.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to launch another audience poll here for you. So you should see that on your screens now. So as we're considering recovery plans, we wanted you to rate what stage you might be in your current recovery planning. So I'll let you vote, and while we are doing that, I'm going to, I'll introduce this next session. So next up, we have a discussion presented by CrowdRiff, exploring why local is going to be the leading edge of destination recovery. This conversation will feature the CEO and founder of CrowdRiff, Dan Holowak, interviewed by Skift research editor again, Jeremy Cressman.
Hi again, everybody. So for this session, we're going to talk about one of the most important steps that destinations will need as they recover and manage this crisis. And I think that's determining the type of travelers that are going to be willing to return to your destination. In the past, I think a lot of destinations, as we talked about in our last panel, they focused on this mix of visitors from their home market and from abroad. But in this new era of destination marketing created by coronavirus, one of the most important audiences may end up being local residents, and then also the local businesses that are in your destination. So in this session, I have Dan with us from CrowdRiff, and he's going to talk to us more about how local stakeholders and why they're going to be such a critical constituency as we plan this recovery process. So Dan, welcome.
Hey everybody. Hey Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
So Dan, so much of what we traditionally think about with destination marketing has to do with attracting visitors from other places to come visit, spend money. What are you seeing right now in your business at CrowdRiff that's making you think local is going to be a more important priority for the sector in the future?
Well, it's really what I'm seeing as a local myself, honestly, and in my destination and hometown here of Toronto. I think that right now, locals just are a necessity. When there are no visitors, locals are the people of your destination. Locals are the only patrons of the businesses and the services that are struggling, to survive. And what I'm seeing happening and what scares me is the number of local businesses, small businesses, family-run businesses that are so suddenly and severely impacted by this. At the same time, what gives me hope is seeing how creative and agile many of these businesses have become in offering new products and services and things to their city and to their neighborhoods. That's created this new problem though, where it's hard to keep up. Almost every day now, there's some new hours of operation, some new product being offered, someone that didn't do delivery now does. A restaurant has become a grocery store with an online shop. So locals are trying to figure out how to navigate all of this. If they can navigate it well, they can actually get more money into those businesses, help DMOs retain the capacity and like the value of all these incredible sort of businesses and the livelihoods of these people. And so I think that DMOs have an amazing role to play right now because they have relationships with the businesses, with the locals, and they must market to the locals and help guide them through this. I remember there's a place that my wife and I frequent for brunch on Queen Street in Toronto called Early Bird. And they're of course not open, they're a restaurant. I found out that they have an online shop now, and we were able to order eggs and fresh guacamole and shishuka. And we walked there, and there was this lineup for the grocery store nearby, all the way around the corner, everybody standing 8 feet apart. We walked past that entire line, a little square in the window popped open at Early Bird. They handed me 2 bags, said thank you 3 times, very grateful that we placed the order, and walked back home and we had what we needed. And this is such an unusual, weird time where locals need a lot of guidance. And at the same time, by helping them and being the DMO that's that kind of shepherd and guide and connecting them with those local businesses is probably the very thing that will help them survive.
So interesting you mentioned this situation in Toronto, Dan. I mean, I've seen something similar where I live as well. A lot of businesses pivoting, offering groceries, things like that. So it's been heartening, but I think it needs more socialization. Do you think local residents have been left out of the tourism equation in the past? I mean, was this a consideration to target locals or to appeal to them really? I mean, I don't feel like it was, right?
No, I mean, I don't think that locals have been left out of the equation. I think they've been on the other side of it, of course. Like the locals are often the ones providing the experiences that are so memorable to the visitors. And they're essential in that sense from a local perspective. But yeah, like now they are the visitors. They're the only people in the destination. And I actually think that in the long run, this is going to be good. I think good for kind of the DMO, for the city and for recovery. In the past, maybe they were out of the equation a bit more because of the traditional kind of funding models for the destination and that focus on the visitors filling up hotels. Perhaps DMOs felt that this was already a solved problem. Maybe they thought that these other tools and apps were already helping their locals. And what's interesting in a time like this is they're not, like they can't keep up. They're not, these other products or apps aren't local enough to your destination to be able to keep up with this day-by-day change. And so it's actually a necessity and also a new time and a new pain that the DMO can help solve for the locals and for the businesses.
Well, so I actually want to ask you about the local business side of this as well. How are the needs of the local business sector different from that of the local residents? I mean, we all know a lot of small businesses are really struggling right now, trying to figure out how to survive. What's your take here?
Well, it's very, very difficult. I mean, the different side of this for the businesses is this is their entire livelihood for some of them. I can't imagine what it's like to work. You work most of your life to build a business, and due to no fault of your own, it can literally disappear. Mm-hmm. So, these businesses are, again, they're just showing tons of ingenuity in whatever way they can. They're becoming more digital. They're launching online shops all of a sudden. They're figuring out how to do delivery. They're figuring out what their core competencies are and slimming down to just the most essential products that they can offer. They're creating new things. And I think that the DMO obviously has, they've had great partnerships with these businesses. That is just more essential. I've heard already how important partnership is right now. And DMOs do operate from this unique place of an intersection of economic growth and focus on that, and on environment, but also, of course, on community. And I think this community aspect is what's so important right now in how the DMO can lead to recovery at a time when, like I said, the livelihood of these small businesses and the survival of them are at stake. And we don't want to be in a position where, tourism and travel is starting to recover, but you no longer have the capacity, meaning the amount of businesses and experiences that you used to have to offer to even accept that, that new travel demand as it comes up. And as I heard, like the supply side is really what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we know there's potentially a supply side problem, but what I have to ask now, what can destinations actually be doing to support their local communities and economies? Before we get to this image, I wanted to ask Dan just to clarify on this question, then we'll get to the images in just a second.
Sure. Yeah, of course, Jeremy. So as I've already heard, as well earlier, that DMOs are stepping into the most important role they've maybe ever had. And I think that the most meaningful of roles that a destination can play. There's a couple things that they can be doing right now, and I'm seeing hundreds of destinations doing some of these things. The first is, of course, immediately just providing current and trusted information that meets the advisory and safety guidelines for their local destination, state, or country. It's really important to be a trusted resource as much as possible and be sharing a message to help everybody stay safe and to help in whatever way they can reach the recovery sooner. I've heard stories where even destinations have to remind their locals and their cities that not traveling literally means don't travel to a neighboring city. Don't travel to a small town where your cottage is or something for the weekend. Don't travel to a place that has very little sort of health capacity or respirators or anything of that need. Just literally, you have to stay where you are. I think the destination plays an important role, not only in that for travelers, but an important role in that within the domestic or regional sense. The other thing that I'm seeing is letting people know what's open, what's available, what's new that's being offered, and doing that in a much more human way. Celebrate the local heroes, celebrate those local businesses. You have an opportunity right now to tap into so much pent-up goodwill. Like the locals in your destination are aching to help. Just show them what they can do to help. Show them how they can get involved. I think it's unprecedented just like how much I guess goodwill could be harnessed at this time when the destination can step in and help be a guide and a leader through that. So make sure that what you're doing is really human. Use video if you can in helping people see what products and services are available. And then the third piece is that idea of like dreaming for the future. So seeing a lot of, think about escaping sort of the future, escape the quarantine, imagine the future. A lot of things are done with audio. Like here's the sound of the waterfall. Here's the sound of this babbling brook. Here's the sound of the wind that's rushing by you when you're on this hike. Sit back when you're at home and just listen to this. So very kind of like audio or kind of experiences, virtual experiences. Think about the people that are in these attractions. Think about the zookeepers, the people that are feeding the animals at the aquarium. Can they be creating some content? I heard a story about a janitorial staff at a museum who made some content, and just really heartwarming, really endearing. So destinations are getting really creative right now around that kind of thing.
So I think a big part of this support process that you're describing, Dan, is the content and the tools that you use to actually support destinations. And as I understand it, CrowdRiff is actually helping to build a tool that may help with this process. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and some of the ways you guys are using content to promote local communities right now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Of course, I feel just an obligation to help. I mean, we've been working in this industry exclusively for so many years, and have, the honor of working with about 800 destinations. That when when this crisis started to hit, all I could think about every day was what can we do to help. And so what our destinations have been using CrowdRiff to source high quality, authentic, user-generated content, get rights to it, and help them be a trusted resource from a source of content that's really plentiful, really budget friendly. And one of those examples I wanted to share today is NYC & Co. So if we can pull up that screenshot. So NYC & Co. is just one of the destinations that use CrowdRiff for this nationally recognized campaign, and was done in partnership with SF Travel and with Discover LA. And it's really about imagery shared through my window. It's really brilliant. We're all kind of inside in quarantine, and we're literally looking out our window at a time when just a sunny morning actually makes a difference these days. So we're looking out our window, and what if you could just capture that? And so instead of having to scroll through thousands upon thousands of UGC to find things that are brand worthy, these destinations, and in New York City specifically here, is using CrowdRiff to be able to kind of launch and track that campaign, and then elevate and share that amazing content to keep that flywheel of content moving, and those kind of good vibes of those locals just loving their city and providing perspectives of New York City and San Francisco and LA that a lot of us haven't really seen before in this New York through my window approach.
And then, as I understand it, you have a couple other examples you were going to share, two other campaigns that are more maybe a little closer to your heart.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I think we can bring up, I shared a screenshot of this new thing we've been thinking about, and we're planning to launch with 3 cities first. So it's called Localhood. It's just something I thought the world needed and deserved at a time like this. And so Localhood is an open and free community where locals can share very first person, very human visual stories about the businesses and experiences that they love in their neighborhood. And by creating that content and those stories that are available across any browser, any device, and across Google, just by the very nature of creating that content, they're actually helping those small businesses. So when you swipe up on one of these stories, it has links for making an order, for having a gift card link to support that business. And so, I felt that, as I said, the pace at which things are changing is extreme and unprecedented. Locals need a way to support each other. I like to think sort of the pace of change within these destinations is happening at like the speed of local. Like there's no other way to know what's going on sometimes than just walk down the street and take a photo of the bulletin on that business's door to know what's happening. So I think locals need a place to help each other and their local hood to navigate, and at the same time have a meaningful impact on businesses too.
Well, great. Dan, this has been super interesting. I think local, it's super important, but often misunderstood or maybe not as high a priority as some other parts of tourism. So thank you so much for your insights. Really appreciate you having you here today.
Thanks for having me here, Jeremy.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So next up, we will be launching another audience poll as we jump into this next discussion. You should see this appearing now on your screen. So the question is, are you using data to help drive your recovery decisions? And this, of course, will lead into our next discussion, considering how data creates the competitive advantage. Joining us will be CEO of Visit Philadelphia, Jeff Guaracino, and moderating will be Skift Senior Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. I think last time we met was in December at a Skift summit, and December feels like 5 years ago to me. But it's great to see you again, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's great to see you again, too. I hope you're well. And hello to all my colleagues who are joining us here on today's really, really great discussion. Thank you for organizing it.
Now, Jeff, you are CEO of Visit Philadelphia, but you also have had a past life doing crisis communications for Atlantic City. And Atlantic City, they went through this terrible crisis when Hurricane Sandy decimated the town. 10,000 people lost their jobs overnight. Is there anything from your lesson from the crisis communications then that you're applying to Philly during COVID-19 now?
Almost everything from that time. What I learned in Atlantic City was in 2012, I started what was called the Atlantic City Alliance. It was actually modeled off of the success of Visit Philadelphia. And what we learned was that all of the things that you've mentioned came in waves. We were first dealing with the Great Recession, and gaming destinations were still having a hard time recovering, and nearby Pennsylvania had full gaming, so more competition. Then all of a sudden, Hurricane Sandy hit Atlantic City and the New Jersey coast, and we found ourselves where we were the eye of the storm, and we could be open for business, but people had the misperception that Atlantic City was closed, just like the rest of the Jersey Shore. And then in addition to that, the following wave came right after Memorial Day, when the following year, when 10,000 people lost their job because, or announced to lose their job because of something called the Federal WARN Act. And so what I've learned that we're applying in what we're doing now at Visit Philadelphia is that you need the data in which to answer all the hard questions which are going to keep coming. And all of them, all of my colleagues are going to be answering some really hard questions, not just immediately, but down the line.
Well, I think that's a key point there. I think everyone on this call, they care about two things. One, they passionately want their destination to rebound because they care about it. But there's also a personal sort of career question here, which is, how is it that, in the next couple of years, DMOs are going to be asked a lot of hard questions like, are you doing enough to really make sure you get your fair share of the rebound when it comes and quickly? And, you've mentioned that Visit Philadelphia has put together a dashboard, which sort of gathers a lot of questions together that stakeholders might ask. We're showing examples of some of the questions on the screen, but tell us about the dashboard.
So we've been asking ourselves the very hard questions that we know we're going to get asked. How do you know it's the right time to get back into marketing? How do you know the marketing is working and effective? How are we doing compared to other destinations? What aren't we doing as an organization, and why when your funding is down? Our strategy is that for every question that we get asked, we want to point to the data, because what's going to happen is everyone's going to have an opinion. The retailers, the hoteliers, your attractions, mayors, elected officials. And so what we think we need to do is to always point to the data to answer the very hard question. Because otherwise, when we know it's going to take years to rebound, and that there's so many other factors in play, especially in the leisure market, where Visit Philadelphia does our tourism marketing for the 5-county region, we have to also set and measure the expectation that people are going to have. They're going to expect a quick rebound. They're going to expect, how do we get back to normal or what it was? And we know that this is going to be a long haul.
Okay, so we just had an audience poll for people attending the Skift Summit, and it says that about 61% said yes, they are using data to sort of drive their decisions. As we move through some of these, some additional images to show what the dashboard looks like, where are some of the sources of data that you kind of use in order to get some of this picture that's relevant to answering these questions, Jeff?
So the data that we relied on, which was website traffic, searches, of course, social media engagement, all the traditional areas of measurement But then we began to add on new sources of data. So for example, Russell Research was based in New Jersey. We immediately engaged them. It was a firm I used previously in Atlantic City to start to not only measure the national perception and to track of where we were and when do we hit bottom, but then we began and continue to ask specific questions around generational travel, income travel, key markets like New York, DC, East Coast, and now we're evolving into very, very specific questions in terms of what are you looking for in a trip? When do you think you might be making your trip decisions? And some of it is coming back startling that people may not make a trip decision for 6 months or longer. What kind of things are you looking for now as a traveler? And what we've already found working in just this particular research, and there are more, is that the traveler themselves are still defining and redefining what they want and what they're looking for. So I think our largest challenge is that we have to wait for the traveler to decide what are they going to look for in a post-COVID world, and we don't know yet. And we're also looking at social media. We're using Sprinkler, a very sophisticated social media listening that has some artificial intelligence in there in which to help us measure when are people associating travel and Philadelphia and COVID. We're also measuring what people are saying through Sprinkler about crime, clean and safe, what they're concerned about. So I think that with these data, with our traditional data like we're doing with tourism economics, and also the data that we have from eConsult about jobs, lost revenue, hotel tax, all of that, we're re-lensing what we already have to help make our case for tourism funding, but also we need to get additional data to help us decide which market needs to hear which message.
So I think one of the points that you sort of brought up there, it resonates with something that you've said at other occasions, which is that you believe that innovation has to come from the traveler or the consumer first. And it sounds like you're sort of looking at how consumer behavior and preferences may change as a result of the crisis. What are the sort of key data metrics that you feel will be more crucial to sort of understanding and tracking consumer behavior right now?
I think that the data, first, things that you can look at over time. You have to invest in the data, whatever your source is going to be for your particular market, your product, your service, that you can keep rechecking in to see how it will evolve. And if we have waves, and what are some trend lines. So what we're going to continue to do is do more online focus groups. We're going to look at other sources of data. We are also freely sharing everything that we learn at visitphilly.com/research. So I want to share that with our colleagues and see what you can glean from that as well. And then begin to look at other types of consumer behavior. Like for example, I cannot wait to see the research that comes out from all of the online behavior and all the data that we're looking at from just as doing these Zooms. We're also doing something that I've not really done before. I am watching the stock prices of different companies because I think the market will also tell you where the opportunities are. So for example, I've been looking at the large stock prices for development companies that own malls. We've seen that their stock prices for malls and retail shopping have gone from $7 to 80 cents. I've also seen e-commerce stock prices go much higher. So one of the areas that is new for me is watching where the stock market is going and where we're seeing the upticks. And that's a new sense of data because at least that can tell me where the business might be going.
That makes sense, Jeff. So one of the points that Dan from CrowdRiff was making earlier is that there's a lot of goodwill that DMOs are able to sort of take advantage of right now. But at the same time, there's sort of this crisis that a lot of the downtown areas that might be Instagrammable have a lot of boarded up storefronts. They may have a lot of signs on stores saying closed, closed, closed. Is there any messaging that you have had to businesses and stakeholders in the community about how to deal with that issue?
Yes, so first and foremost, we are here to serve our community and we are here to serve our mayor, and our governor to help them in any way that we can. And so one of the first things that our mayor asked us to help with was, how do we get a message out to stay home? How can you help us do a thank you message across every kind of essential worker who's keeping our city moving? And so we quickly started on that. We're also working at our mayor's request on Mental Health Awareness Month. I mean, these are areas where we normally would not be marketing, but we wanted to make sure that we can help. We have boarded up businesses in our downtown, and we decided that that's a symbol of closed. So we, over the last weekend, had a local printer create giant 4 feet by 8 feet posters for us. And we hired 2 local street artists who worked with us on the City of Sisterly Love campaign. And we said, will you put these up all over town? And we didn't put our logo on it. We didn't put the city's logo on it. And that was a way for us to say that there is hope and we can't wait to come back. And then the media started to ask the mayor, who did that? And so the mayor said, Visit Philadelphia did. And then all of a sudden, we were able to spread the message of hope. We're going to come out on the other side of this, and that this city is not closed. In addition, by working so closely with our mayor, we're able to be a little bit ahead of helping him craft the key messages that we need to see communicated. So that way, when we do start to reopen our city, when we do ask locals to become tourists in their own town, we don't have as much cleanup work to do. And so I really thank our mayor for the opportunity to do that. And we also made a decision at visitphilly.com that we are not going to be doing closed, because that's going to come up in our search next year when people are searching for trips in Philadelphia and our 5-county region. So we made some early decisions knowing that we're in this crisis, but we'll eventually be on the other side of this crisis. And our cleanup work, I think one of our earlier speakers said, you know, we're on the second wave in terms of coming through this. But what I learned from Atlantic City, and I was at Visit Philadelphia at 9/11, was that the cleanup has to begin during the crisis, because the potential mistakes that could be made there, we'll spend a lot of time trying to clean up later.
Very good points, Jeff. And it echoes with something that, Brad Dean from Discover Puerto Rico has said on other occasions, which is that, after the hurricanes, there was a lot of visual imagery that got online of Puerto Rico having a lot of destruction, and then that was turning up in social search. And so they needed to sort of make an effort to make sure they were populating good, positive images of the island when people are doing their discovery. I want to wrap up with one sort of final question. Earlier in the conversation, Brad and Stacy Melman from Visit Florida, they were talking about this as an opportunity to sort of rethink, once we get past the crisis stage, rethink how DMOs, consider their funding sources, consider their mission, considering how they collaborate with regional stakeholders. Do you have any views on that topic?
That's the absolute question that we have to ask ourselves. And we've been doing that at Visit Philadelphia. And we looked at our mission and we said, we can fulfill this mission, but it's going to have to be done in a different way. And I think first and foremost, we have, as destination marketers, we have to take care of the product, of our community, of our people. We really have to do it in a thoughtful way. And listen, this is a decade of immense change that's going to happen and evolution. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to rethink our role in the community. How can we serve? How can we fulfill our mission in new ways? But also keep in mind that we're here to put people to work, put meals on the table. And if you don't lose sight of that, and we always remain optimistic and hopeful because there is a better day ahead, all of us as an industry will be uplifting our cities and our regions. And that's the most important thing that we can do, because we're always the positive people. We're always the cheerleaders. And this industry is resilient. We're not afraid of hard work. We are really not. And so I think all of us together really will find our meaningful role in the lives of our neighbors and our friends. And travel plays a very meaningful role in humanity. So I'm really excited to be here with you and all of my colleagues around the world. And anything that we can do, Visit Philadelphia If we can help, reach out. We're here right with you. And thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for sharing those thoughts about how data can give a competitive edge. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to our speaker.
Thank you, Jeff and Sean. That was excellent. So now we are going to launch one final poll around our next discussion, which will be around messaging. So thinking about how you're currently messaging and the tenor of that, how would you describe your current external messaging around your business, destination, and travel? So with that, as you vote on that poll, our final discussion today will explore destination storytelling and the path to build global confidence in U.S. destinations. This conversation, we're very excited to have the CMO of Brand USA, Tom Garzilli, and this will be moderated by Skift Global Tourism reporter, Rosie Spinks.
Thank you for turning that over, Brian. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us today. Sorry, it took me a moment to find you there.
I did the same thing. I lost myself for a second, but I am here. Thanks, Rosie. It's great to be with you and this esteemed panel of experts from across the country. Glad to be a part of this conversation.
We're thrilled to have you. So let's think a few months back, as Sean said, feels like 5 years ago. But Brand USA finished last year sort of securing its funding really in the 11th hour. And I know from covering it, it was by no means certain. And then not 2 months into this year, we've been launched into this unprecedented crisis. So let's just start there. How is Brand USA faring in these truly extraordinary times?
I will say we came out of our reauthorization work, and of course, so many people who I'm sure are on this call and who were involved in that process. We're deeply appreciative for all the support we got. It was securing our future beyond 2021. In other words, beyond 2020. So we had our funding for 2020. It was to make sure that we went on beyond that. So as we come into this year and through the remainder of this year, we're fine relative to our funding, and now just working on making sure we maximize that for 2021. And there's still a lot of time. Of course, obviously the market's going through amazing change, but I feel confident we'll be okay in terms of getting and keeping our funding moving forward.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So you told us in preparing for this summit that one of Brand USA's biggest focuses right now is to help destinations persist and keep the lights on and stay operational. So can you give us some examples of how Brand USA is doing that?
Sure. When you think about, what we were saying earlier is, we feel very much that we're purpose-built for times such as these, because as we were created and as we've developed our strategies, it's always been around, telling the stories of America to the world, to be working at the levels very much on the ground around the world to the travel trade, and then talking to consumers at a very high inspirational level. And to do that, we've built platforms for both. And right now, and it is interesting because I go back to early February when we had our partner roundtables where we bring a large number of our partners together. We did in DC. It was the first week of February. So it's just at the beginnings of all this. And really, as we talked about it then and we have since, is this idea of, our destination partners, our attractions are going to be focusing really on their own existential issues, and then also how to launch out locally. And so where we are living and continue to live is keeping the lights on around on the travel trade side. We are engaging right now every day across all of our markets with the trade. We're doing training. We've trained already about 11,000 agents just in the last couple of months. We'll continue to do that, continue to be working with tour operators. We're putting in place what we're just thinking of as kind of a quick start marketing plan that will launch when the time is right. That's a more tactical plan of working with tour operators on packages and call to action and booking, that we can launch fairly quickly when we are all in agreement that it's the right moment.
Right.
But then on the consumer side, it's what we've been doing. We've built a platform around, authentic, genuine, inspiring storytelling through films and our digital channels and through our Go USA TV platform, which provides us an opportunity to let consumers stay home and keep dreaming. And we are doing that, of course, on the international front. But we also realize, especially in this particular time, it's as valuable a tool for the domestic audience. So Go USA TV, which is, Roku, Amazon, Apple, it's an app, it's on YouTube. It's got hundreds of stories, hundreds of hours of content featuring destinations from across the country. And we are pushing it out to audience. We're going to be doing, for example, a digital roadblock event tomorrow to get all our partners to participate in pushing it out to their local audiences and their local stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, 60% more, there are 60% more engagement of digital and streaming television right now. People are sitting back, they're dreaming, they want to see content, and they want to see great storytelling, and our destinations have great and amazing things to talk about. So we're trying to keep all those things going while we know our partners are dealing with their much more tactical issues.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up some of those campaigns. Brad and Stacy and I spoke a little bit earlier about some of their favorite campaigns centered on staying home. So one might call this kind of crisis-based or crisis-adjacent advertising. What's your take on that approach? Are you a fan of that?
I think, since you bring up, for example, Brad, I think their virtual vacations work that they're doing right now, that kind of storytelling, that kind of engagement, I think is fantastic. I do think there's a temptation to go to the soft music, somber voices, we're so sorry we're apart, we're going to be together someday. That I don't think is very productive. I think ultimately good messaging today is the same as it ever was. It's useful, it's relevant, or it is entertaining. If it's not one of those things, then we shouldn't be doing it. So I think whether it's aligned directly to your home right now, so do these things, or just sharing with audiences great stories and just destinations are their story, and they just need to be true to that, and not feel the temptation to have to change it very much, because everyone's in the exact same situation, and we just are looking for relief and for interesting and entertaining experiences.
Right. So DMOs and CVBs were left out of the first iteration of the CARES Act, as you know, and the U.S. Travel Association, which lobbies on behalf of Brand USA, is working really hard to rectify that. So I'm curious if do you see a way for tourism to sort of better assert itself as an industry in America in light of this crisis?
Well, I think, again, we that is much more a U.S. travel kind of agenda item. But I would just say, I think one of the things that will come out of this, like other crises, is as an industry, we're coming together much more. I think it's clearer to the localities, the legislatures, that how important tourism is, and in the lack of it right now, what the impact is. And so from that perspective, I think U.S. Travel's done a great job. I mean, as they brought the industry together in a big way around helping Brand USA and our reauthorization, and I think that's led right into this latest crisis. And I think we will emerge stronger in terms of an ability to show the country how critical tourism is. And I think from Brand USA's perspective, also in helping to tell the story of how important international inbound tourism is as an economic driver, across many, many industries.
Right, right. Thanks for addressing that. And you're right, U.S. travel has certainly proved itself time and time again in the last few months, or their efficacy and role. So Brand USA, is, as you just were alluding to, is really focused on increasing inbound visitation to the United States. I wonder how you think about, and if you worry about, some of the geopolitical reverberations of this crisis. And, you know, I published a story yesterday about Chinese outbound tourism, and some of the sources I spoke to had this sense that Chinese travelers might be less willing to come to the U.S. due to some of our government leaders' framing of this crisis as a uniquely Chinese phenomenon, which isn't really accurate. So how do you counter that as a marketer? Have you thought about that?
Sure, we think about it a lot, and you know, particularly when it comes to China, we're always thinking about it, because prior to this, you know, you had trade issues and other concerns. Right. And what I can say is we can do what we are capable of doing, which is we work hard in China to deliver a welcome message, a welcoming message. We put in place at the end of last year, you know, some influencer-based content that was really about, you know, sharing the welcome and a greater welcome. You know, we do really feel on a very general basis, you know, that travel transcends politics, and it does. That's not to be naive about the fact that there are specific issues going on around the world, but in the end, there will be a market of Chinese consumers who are dreaming of coming here, that want to come here, that have the wherewithal to do it. When when their country and our country, when we're open up to that being possible, we're going to be there to just make sure they're welcome. And of course, again, going to our destination partners who are more about managing their destinations, they'll be doing the same thing and making sure that the welcome they're providing, the product they're providing is meeting the expectation of that traveler. So we think about all of those things, and we put in place, you know, the things we think we can do to offset them.
Right. But it sounds like what you're saying is it's less about directly addressing that narrative and more about kind of shoring up your existing programs and messages and storylines. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, we're always telling stories to these prospective travelers in the ways they want to consume them, and we're always about inspiring them and letting them know they're welcome. And, you know, that's where we live, and we should continue to be.
Okay, fair enough. Stacey brought up this really interesting point about the simultaneous fragility and sort of interdependence of travel. And I know Brand USA really focuses so much on that international inbound aspect of this, but I wonder if that struck a nerve with you. Did you have any thoughts on her sort of framing of that?
Well, it's just, I mean, you know, the point is well taken, and I think it's felt so much more strongly as you get closer and closer to the marketplace, and so, you know, as someone that's been in the industry my whole career and has done so much, you know, work with so many of these wonderful cities and markets, it's a concern. From a Brand USA perspective, again, you know, we're kind of living so much higher in the funnel in terms of what we can do to support the business, which is, purely just to continue to give tools to those partners and to continue to talk to the consumers in the best way we can.
Right, right. I wonder what sort of indicators Brand USA is looking at to gauge when to kind of shift their marketing into a more, okay, now is time kind of.
Yeah. So, we're looking at the same tools that I think all of our partners are. I mean, we're trying to live in kind of three places: one of guidance and information, and being able to continue to be doing research on the ground around the world and sharing that with our partners here, and to be providing that message of hope and optimism, and to be building a set of actionable marketing tools that are spooled up and ready to go when we all kind of agree it's the right moment. I look at the airlines, I look at our big hotel partners, who we are all kind of connected to, and they're going to be able to kind of inform when things are really opening up, right? When the airlines are that we're talking to on a regular basis are saying to us, okay, we're getting ready to launch back in these markets, and that's when we're going to know it's time for us to be there and help them spread that message, and that timing is moving, but we'll be ready when it comes.
Right. Okay, my last question is a sort of big picture question. What's the biggest change that you envision might happen to U.S. tourism as a result of this moment we're all living through?
Well, I think right now, I think it's just going to be how quickly can we get the what I would say is the kind of that second round of destinations opened up. It won't be surprising that Canada and Mexico will be back fairly quickly. Those are, especially Canada, almost local markets in some cases. But and then we get to UK and Western Europe, and if the question will be the Chinas and the Indias and Asia, how quickly will we be able to spool them back up, and how quickly will the air service be there, and so on. But I have no data to go on, but to say that I think, and I've read in some of the comments as I've been following the chat lines, this is such a different crisis than anything we've ever seen. And I just think once things turn back on and people feel globally, there's a confidence that we can start to live normally again. I think it's going to come back more quickly than it might have if this was a U.S. only kind of a tragedy, or even a localized issue that we've kind of dealt with before. So there will be challenges market by market, and we'll just be ready for those as we see them. And we feel optimistic that that the world still loves the USA, and they want to come here, and they will, as soon as they can.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tom. We really enjoyed hearing your insights.
Thanks, Rosie. I appreciate it, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our Skift's Online Summit. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their ideas and perspectives. And we'd also like to thank our partner, CrowdRift, for sponsoring today's online summit. Once again, we'll be sharing the recording of this webinar later this week via forum.skift.com. You can view all of our continuing crisis coverage on the industry at skift.com. Thank you so much, and we hope to have you join us for a future Travels Path Forward online summit.